So once we've got this key fundamental understanding of the key words, we can now start to analyze some of the trending elements. So we don't want to necessarily jump into a prediction, or we don't necessarily want to be influenced by something that really is a flash in the pan. And at the same time, we don't want to be consumed by what we think is a minor issue, when in reality it's gaining momentum, or it's been building for some time and it could well consume us. So on the left there, number one, look at the search terms. We can also look for ranges, locations, and so on. Number two, we put in a specific search term, much the same as we did before. Number three, we've got a number of variables that we can choose, such as searching the web, worldwide, country, location. We can look from 2004 until present. We look at the last 6 months, the last 30 days, all categories, and so on. And then number four, we can also start to look at some of the seasonality. So obviously you would expect Christmas carols around the holiday periods, or Hanukkah, or Ramadan, or the Hajj, and all those sorts of Easter, all those sorts of seasonal things that take place at certain times of the year. You can also segment out or get an understanding as to how popular they may be. Chinese New Year, all of these things have seasonal related search terms. They happen on a cyclic basis, not necessarily on a daily or a monthly basis. So we've got quite a range here that we can experiment with the basics to give us a better picture, or help us shape a more informed report or analysis before we start to then work at counter plans or management or key areas that we need to focus for communication. And Google Insights is the name of this tool, and you can find it just by typing into your search engine Google Insights. Now the results are very interesting. The results in this instance, we've used Libya. So again, with the Arab Spring, the issues that led to the capitulation and turnover of governance in Libya. We've got Libya over the last 12 months. So number one is Libya. Number two is the last 12 months. We're looking worldwide. Number three are the key search terms that we can identify and breakout trends like Libya after Gaddafi, endgame in Libya, House denies Obama on Libya. So there's a whole bunch of search and related trends, so we can get some insight into what the public or our broad spectrum demographic is actually concerned about or looking about. So unlike the subjective nature of journalism in most instances, we can get a grassroots or a raw intelligence view as to what people are looking for and what they're thinking about. So this gives us, both performing trends, breakout elements. Number four also shows us, and this is quite a surprising element for most, I'm sure, is number four tells us where this traffic actually originated from. So interestingly enough, those who are most interested in Libya on the internet originated from within Libya. So this is the strength and the power and veracity of social media, is that those who were in Libya and most directly affected were the ones most likely to be searching and looking for on social networks and information update, because there really was a vacuum, and for the first time many were able to access these platforms. And notwithstanding the fact that a lot of journalists and foreign correspondents were going into the country as well, most of the interest on Libya originated from Libya. So again, this is a powerful metric or a powerful observation tool for most, to be able to segment and understand that what may be all-consuming and being reported all around the world and quite topical, at the end of the day, you can actually get a bit of a gauge as to which countries and which demographics and which cultures are more interested or more concerned or most affected by the news, rather than assuming that everybody's in the same boat, rather than assuming that the entire US is interested, rather than assuming that everyone in the UK is focused on this issue, when the reality is far from that. Now, number 6 down the bottom has the general broad term. So we've got Libya news, war Libya, map Libya, Gaddafi Libya. And again, this gives us valuable insight to making an assessment. As part of our analysis, we need to understand the content and the context in relationship to what it is that we're going to base our forecast on, whether it's going to be empirical data, whether it's going to be an artistic, more sort of divining approach, or we're looking at the evidence here and we can see the crowdsourcing ability available to the general intelligence. And this is where most organizations are either getting smarter or focusing, is that the wisdom of crowds, as was written in the book and so on, is it can give us a more balanced approach. It can give us insight as to what the general concern is, rather than our very limited sample pools, which are often the reality of our own internal organizations and business units. instead of 3 or 4 or a few hundred people or even a couple of thousand people, we're actually able to get and poll millions of people for this particular insight. So it can be extremely valuable, and this is really only the first couple of stages, which for many of you I'm sure is either new or you've never considered it in this particular format. And yep, based on a couple of the chats, a few people are commenting that they've never used this and they consider themselves to be social media or business analysts or intelligence collection. This is free. This is available. It's been there for years. Most people either don't know it's there or they certainly don't use it effectively. Now, another one, just excuse me while I have a drink, is Google Trends. Google Trends, again, helps give us the distribution, the standard deviation, the median, the trends, the upwards, ups, down, sideways, and so on. So what we can do is in the number one area, we can put in multiple search terms or single search terms. We can look at some of the trends here, American Idol, baby names, Oscars, and so on, whatever's topical at the time. Number 3, we can see some hot searches. So again, it gives us some insight into perhaps it's an oil spill, perhaps it's a scandal, perhaps it's a business going into solvency, or a unhinged celebrity, or you name it. All sorts of things can be topical, and we can get some insight as to whether we're appearing in the top 10 and whether it's as big a concern as we may think it is. Then again, number 4 is, as we've covered before, the Google Insights for the search terms, and then 5, we can look at some of the trends for websites and cross-section some of the audience. Google Trends is the name of this tool, and again, you can find it just by Google Trends into a search engine. Now, the results again, so if we look at the London riots is an excellent opportunity to understand how the footprint of disruption, how long did it go for, how long was it topical, who was affected, who cared, and how this particular unfolding event shaped people's decision making. So as you can see here in spot 1, we've put in London riots. Spot 2, we've just looked over the last 12 months, so we've got an aggregated, balanced view of how London riots. Now, obviously, London riots don't happen every day in London. Well, here's hoping they're not. Number 3 then gives us some insight into specifically what happened and specifically what people are looking for. And as you can see, it was a momentous increase in activity. London riots around the August period there, police and all of the activities, but it really did not last that long. Now, the events themselves didn't last that long, but many of these events can have a residual. They can have a lingering effect, whether it's a tsunami, a natural disaster, terrorism, the collapse of a company. They can have a much longer tail, but this really was just a blip. This was a short-term, very short duration concern. Unfortunately, this also meant that a lot of people were completely ill-equipped or unprepared for it. They didn't really understand the impact that it had at the time. And unfortunately, by the time they realised what was happening and all worked out well, they think it was basically through their own grace and charms and their own planning that they managed to contain the situation, when in reality they were just lucky. And as again, number 4, we can look at the demographics in the region. So we've got the UK, Ireland, Australia, New Zealand. Again, many of the usual suspects. We can even look at the cities and the languages in which people were looking for. So as you can see, by and large, the concerns for the UK were limited to largely the UK, largely the most populous cities in which most of the events were taking place, and most of this was taking place in English. These are facts. These are standalone pieces of data. When converged and merged with an assessment, can be extremely insightful, and they're more akin to evidence-based decision making rather than, as I said, these subjective, artistic, divining, cloak and dagger, black art type assessments that too many people are guilty of, and too many experts in particular way into. Is that here's the cold reality, here's the stark facts. Now, you can derive or extrapolate a number of outcomes from this, but here's the evidence and the baseline assessment which everybody should be starting from. And it's certainly something to engage senior executives and senior managers with. When you can show them these sorts of things and you can demonstrate your reasons for your certain assessment or reasons for corrective actions, treatment solutions, it's far more valuable, it's far more transparent than some of the more opaque assessments that typically promulgate when it comes to business intelligence.